First of all, let's understand when we say matrimonial litigation, what is the first thing that comes to our mind? I would like even the audience members to just write it down in the chat box. That will be better. We can keep it interactive, right? It is divorce. When we say matrimonial litigation, the first thing that pops in our mind is divorce, which is not wrong. Everything around it is linked to that very term. But to understand it, let's break it down. Matrimony and litigation. It consists of two words. So while in common parlance, when we say matrimonial litigation, it is divorce. But when we say it in specific words, it can be anything, any kind of litigation that is around a matrimonial couple. It can start with our own very favorite divorce. But then the couple can also think that let's stay separately, but let's not dissolve the legal ties. So they may go for a judicial separation. Then one of the spouse may want the other back. They may file for a restitution of conjugal rights. Then the biggest victims of this litigation, children. There is child custody. There is a maintenance case, right? There is a domestic violence case. There's so many aspects to a matrimonial litigation. But when a client will come to you, the client will plainly and simply come and tell you, मुझे इसके साथ नहीं रहना, or I want to stay separately. Nobody will come out and tell you कि हमें ये specific relief चाहिए. वो as a lawyer आपको ढूंढना है कि आप उसको क्या रिलीफ प्रॉमिस कर सकते हो और क्या रिलीफ दिलवा सकते हो और क्या आपको दिलवाना चाहिए कंसिडरिंग उनकी फैमिली में बच्चे हैं या नहीं, पेरेंट्स इन्वॉल्व है या नहीं, एक्चुअली पार्टीज में डिस्प्यूट है या नहीं. So this is the background. Now let's come to the very topic, challenges faced during matrimonial litigation. Now, litigation in itself has a lot of challenges. We know that litigation is infamous for being very expensive. Okay? It is said that even the party who wins actually loses because they have lost so much of money. So even if they get something in return, they've lost. There is no win. Then we are infamous for, litigation is infamous for being extremely time consuming. In civil cases, it is also said that when a grandfather files for a relief, wants a relief, the grandchild gets the relief, right? So this, of course, all this is true for the matrimonial litigation as well. But there have to be some challenges which are exclusive and peculiar to matrimonial litigation, which is not true for other forms of litigation. So in matrimonial litigation, one thing we know that the parties were once in love with each other. Most of them were once upon a time in love with each other, and they were each other's closest confidants. So they know each other extremely well, and they were formerly in love, and now they hate each other in most cases. And we know both love and hate are extreme emotions. Please highlight the term emotions, because that brings us to the first challenge we as lawyers and parties also face. And that is emotional volatility of the client. In a matrimonial litigation, egos are ruffled and emotions run extremely high. And that is where I would say the job of a lawyer comes in the situation. According to me, the toughest job of a matrimonial lawyer is to handle the client's emotional volatility. There are some times when the client will come to you, approach you that they want a divorce, and they will come to your chamber and you will sit with the client, and the client will talk to you for 1 hour straight. And out of that 1 hour, there is maximum to maximum 5 minutes of relevant information that you'll get. And that is also if you're lucky. In some cases, if the cause of action has just arisen, the client will come to you, and for the first 1 or 2 or 3 meetings, the client will come, try to talk, and just keep on crying. The client will cry. So one thing, tissues are our best friend. Please do have them. So, emotional volatility of the client will try to steer the case according to how the client wants it. Now, the role of you as matrimonial lawyers comes the client is emotional, the lawyer is not. And I would say the lawyer need not be. It is the same as a doctor trying to operate on somebody the doctor is interested in. The operation won't go through. So the lawyer has to maintain a third party approach. You have to take the bird's eye view. I'll tell you why. Because there may be one particular instance that the client is telling you about, and the client may, on two different occasions, tell you the same instance from two different perspectives. Why? Because the emotions at that very moment are governing his thought. There may also be cases where the client will not tell you the entire story. The client will only tell you he did this or she did that, or he said this or she said that. What you have to do is maneuver the client to make the client talk to you and tell you the entire story and not just their emotional state. So in short, you have to extract the facts of the case from the client despite the client being vulnerable. And you cannot plainly and simply tell the client that cut this out, I just want the facts. So you have to handle both the client's emotions and also the client's case facts. That is the first challenge that we are talking of, right? Then once you are you have taken all the facts and you have made your case. Now what happens is the client is emotional again. So the other party comes to the client, says something. The client will come to you and say, no, 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 now I don't want a divorce only. I want this relief also. Say, I want maintenance also. Or say, I want to file this case also. Or I want my child's custody also. My child is not safe. So you were ready with your paperwork. You were ready to go to court, and the client just changed the brief. Why did this happen? He was running through the emotion. So the relief of the client also will keep on changing. That's a huge challenge. So you have to understand what the client wants. You also have to understand what the client needs. And you have to tell the client very peacefully, tactfully, that this is what you need and this is what we are going to get you through. Right? That is, I would say, the most challenging part of matrimonial litigation. Bringing the client to the surface level and making him understand that this is what a third party perspective tells us. Now, suppose you've handled all that. You are ready with your case. Now you go to court. Now you don't only win with your story being ready or your client being on your side. You need evidences. Unlike other cases where you have a trail of evidences ready, like suppose it was a contract, so you had something in paperwork. If it was some other criminal case or some other civil case, you had gone to somebody's house, there would be travel records. You have talked to somebody on phone, there would be phone records. But in this case, two parties are living in the same house. They are not traveling to each other's apartments. They are not talking on phone majority of times. And whatever is happening is happening in the confines of the house. Where do you get the evidence for that? That becomes an issue. That is why somewhere we see that the courts also accept circumstantial evidences also, or in maybe domestic violence cases, they if your story and your clients, especially if it is the girl, in cross examination she is able to maintain that story and she doesn't break, then the courts take that. Why? Because the courts understand that something if happens in a family, it actually we are being brought up to understand that it should stay in the family. Even the neighbors will also not be very good witnesses because they will not testify. So where do you get the evidence? Is it possible Can we say that you will not get the evidence at all? No. We will get evidence. We can get WhatsApp conversations. We can get telephonic conversations, which we call electronic records. We can get, if you are talking of maybe what we domestic violence or a dowry, I would say a dowry case. What we do is sit with the client, look at the wedding photographs, and find what was given, what was taken. If you have a child custody case, and suppose you are the father and the mother has is saying that you're not a responsible parent, so we have your photographs with the child. The child will be told to choose between the two. The child will also tell. Then there are maybe call recordings. So all these evidences can be there, or I would say we can start collecting evidences. I wouldn't say we make them, but we start collecting them the moment we realize that okay, fine, now the dispute is escalating, and we may need to go to court. But still, I would say that in a matrimonial dispute, nobody marries and collects proof at the same time. It's only when things get sour that we start thinking of all this. So collection of evidence, even if less, but it should be done well. Start recording calls. Maybe if something happened, if it was a physical abuse, then go and get an MLC. If it is if the wife has just given you a gift and she's claiming that it was a dowry demand, there would be some WhatsApp chat, some telephonic conversation. Track that. So start slowly and steadily. Tell your client, explain your client the need of evidence, and tell them to start collecting them. Now let's say we are ready with the evidence also. Now we are ready for court. But let's understand what challenge actually got us here. The challenge that actually got us here was, of course, non-compatibility of the couple, yes. But social influence. Social influence is a huge challenge that we face. You say challenge, I can even call it a catalyst. In some instances, the couple is fine by themselves. It is the interference of the families, it is the interference of the societies that lead them there. Like, if it is a husband, the wife's family may tell him, you are not taking care of my daughter this way. Or if it is the wife, the husband's family may interfere. It is said, right, that in the West, it is a union of two souls. In India, it is a union of two families. But I would say in reality, it is a union of more than two souls. It's a union of two families, two cultures, two backgrounds. And in Hindi, if I say, do biradariyon ka milan. So social influence is a huge challenge. And as a lawyer, when a party comes to you, the first, I would say, thing you should do is the first test of whether the party needs to go to court or you can help them out in saving the marriage, is that you look at them in isolation, apart from the society, their parents, their families. And even then, if you think that they are, as a couple also, cannot survive without the social influence, then I would say suggest your client to go to court. Otherwise, as a lawyer, it is your duty to tell them to at least give their marriage a chance, or at least find ways if the social influence can be eliminated. Now, is social influence always bad? That is also not true, right? We cannot always say that the society is the only villain in the situation. In older times, if you know, बिरादरी बैठती थी और सब प्रॉब्लम सुलझा देती. Now in metropolitan areas, especially in working metropolitan areas like Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, in some cases, my clients tell me I do not even want to involve my mother or my parents. So it is only those two people. They say I am not involving even my parents in it. It was my decision. I started it. I want to end it. So that I want to end it. So there, the good side of the society, which would help the couple out, is also going. That is a huge challenge. Society, the social influence, whether good or bad, both should be taken into consideration. अब ये सब तो हो गया. Now I say all this is taken into situation. Now we are going to court. Now before going to court, one thing also should be kept in mind. People do not think through before playing it dirty. When we want to go into litigation, we go all out. We say, if we are a girl, we will say he harassed me. When he demanded dowry, his parents are a problem, his family is a problem, his relatives is a problem. When it is a girl, when it is a boy, he'll say the woman's character is a problem, his family was always interfering, it was not my fault at all. So what we do is, the girl's side will diminish the whole family's image. The boy side will assassinate the girl's character. This is a tried and tested method. It has become so, you can say, when somebody says matrimonial litigation, the other party knows what cases are going to come. It has become a norm. But what we don't understand is, the moment we start playing dirty, the bad blood increases so much that there is no going back. Only the thing that you do is you add damage to not yourself, but your entire families, your clans. So I would say, before playing dirty, at least as a lawyer, tell your client that, this will be the outcome. And if we start the proceedings as are usually done, then you will not be able to go back in your marriage if you have a change of heart. One, you won't be able to go back in your marriage if you have a change of heart. Two, if there are children involved or families involved, then they will face harassment and problems. And three, if you just want to exit, then there are other ways of exiting also. Because we have to understand that, unlike other litigations, this litigation has a lot of collateral damage. It is not just litigation which will involve you as a couple. It will have so many people who will be crushed socially, emotionally, and sometimes even legally, because of your fighting and your egos and your emotions. Let's go to that collateral damage one by one. First of all would be the parents of the parties. The boy's parents will be dragged in a domestic violence case. The boy's mother will always be said to be the prime reason for why they are separating. The whole family, including some close relatives, will be dragged in a dowry harassment case. Then, of course, our favorite mode of taking divorce is cruelty. So the boy will be charged with committing physical cruelty, emotional cruelty, mental cruelty, and he'll just be labeled as, I would say, a monster who was his wife could not live with him. Then the brothers, the sisters, they will be dragged into it. Divorce is a social stigma in our society. So even now, even in places like Delhi, there are times when you see a boy who is divorced, and the first word that the relatives will say, bechara, or the relatives will say, now इनके घर पे लड़की नहीं देनी, इनको अपनी बहुएं रखनी नहीं आती. Or if it is the girl, then the younger sister will have trouble in getting married. So that is collateral damage. Your parents, your siblings. But I would say the biggest victim of a matrimonial litigation is neither the husband, nor the wife, nor the parents or the family. It is the children. The children are the biggest victims. First of all, what they see is, they see their parents are fighting in open court, slinging abuses at each other. I have even, in Rohini court, I have even seen a couple just outside the courtroom almost trying to physically beat each other in a fight, then the children will be asked, whom do you choose between your mother and your father? Whom do you want to live with? The court will ask them. The children, even if I say, okay, fine, the children choose one person, is it necessary that the court will give the custody to that very parent? No, because the court's primary concern is the welfare of the child. Though the court may think of where the child wants to go, but the court will take its own decision, keeping everything in mind: the child's education, the child's marriage, the child's safety, the child's well being. So the child even suffers that way. Now, if we go according to the society, everybody, and especially the children, other peers, will keep on taunting the child about how his parents are fighting with each other. The biradari is also no different, the society is also no different. So the child becomes a biggest, I would say, the biggest victim of a matrimonial litigation. So these are some of the biggest challenges we face in matrimonial litigation. And of course, there are ways how you, as a lawyer, and I can see most of you are future lawyers, there are ways in which you as a lawyer can help your clients out, or can help your case out by being very, very observant. If your client tells you something, does not mean that that is the whole truth. The client will only tell you, in the first instance, their side of the story. It's only later when you make them explain that I am not the court, I am your own lawyer, and I need to know the whole story, so that the other party cannot just bring something to my notice. Only then will the client start slowly and steadily opening up to you. So you have to be, one, patient. It takes time. I know we always feel like telling the client that, please don't do this. If we have our time is very precious, please speak up. But you cannot do that. You have to understand that it's not them but their emotions that are talking to you. Two, you have to make your client understand that I as a lawyer need to know the whole truth. Even if something is wrong, has been done from your side. So that is the second thing you can do. Third thing I would say you should do is, once your entire case is ready, even if you have a strong hand, in other cases, what we do is, in civil litigation or in criminal, what we do is, when we have a strong hand, we never tell our clients to step back, because we know winning, we want to win, and we want our clients also to get the relief that they want. But in matrimonial litigation, nobody wins. They either lose or they win, but they lose. So you have to be a responsible lawyer and make sure that your client not only gets what they want, but also gets what they need. And what will that? Now, these are the challenges, right? But there have to be some way forward. I will cover both, for the society also and for lawyers also. So for the society, first of all, I would want to say, like in India, we get our horoscopes checked. We get them matched, right? But I would say the first and foremost thing to enter into a matrimonial alliance should be to get a compatibility check. You need to understand that the both of them are compatible. The couple needs to be compatible, because chemistry may work, but it does not always ensure compatibility in the long run. So more than having chemistry, or more than having your horoscope smashed, or more than finding the other person beautiful or attractive, compatibility check, I would say, is the first thing you should do before entering into a matrimonial alliance. And this I am saying after, I don't know, realizing that so many of my clients just lacked this very basic, and they had such terrible fights after that, not realizing where the problem lies. Now, there are pre-marital counseling also. So please, if you are entering into a relationship, if you are entering into alliance, go join a pre-marital counseling session, go have it, see where your future problem areas can be, find them. If you have problem areas, for example, you should be on the same page about whether you want a child or not, or whether you want a career or not, or whether you want to live with your families or not. Like nowadays, we are seeing that courts are also ruling that a husband should be granted divorce on the ground of cruelty if the wife refuses to live with the parents of the husband and wants to separate the husband from the parents. Don't you think if a pre-marital counseling session would have cleared those thoughts out, then maybe these divorces could have been avoided. You could just have parted ways before going through all that trouble. Now let's say you didn't see all this and you got married anyway. Now what? Now you have a dispute, you have a trouble. First of all, earlier times what used to happen? First step, you have a fight, talk to each other, sort it out. Second step, go to your parents, they will sort it out. Third step, the society. I think somebody's mic is on. Yeah. Third step, the society, your social relatives, your near relatives, biradri, they will help you out. And what if all this doesn't work out? Then there you can go in for a marriage counseling, where you can sit with the counselor, you can talk to the counselor. The counselor will help you either A, solve your problems and stay in the marriage. Get back. There were small little problems that you were making a hill out of a mole. But what if that doesn't work? Is the marriage counseling only for that? No. If the counselor thinks that no, your disputes are actually worth it and you cannot go back into the relationship, then you can find a very peaceful exit out of the relationship. It doesn't need to be with abusing each other in open court, dragging each other's family, making it dirty, playing dirty. No. You can have a very peaceful, simple, decent exit with as much dignity as with which you entered into the marital alliance. If the counseling also doesn't work, then there are options for a mediation. Even in family courts, the first thing, normally the courts are inclined towards first sending the couple for a mediation. It is very inexpensive, and there'll be a neutral person who will sit, neither from the girl's side nor from the boy's side, and the parties will come to a conclusion, not the mediator. The mediator will only steer you towards a very peaceful exit. And I would say that sitting on the table, either with a marriage counselor or with maybe a mediator, and sorting your things out on the table is the most intelligent decision you will take in your life. And if you are a lawyer who's representing somebody, then I know that litigation makes us money, but I think that it will be best if for your client and for your own self, for your image as a lawyer, if you just give the client the right advice. And according to me, if you ask for my advice would always be that first of all, please try every way, one, to reconcile, especially if there are children involved. Two, if reconciliation is not possible and it is a toxic marriage, then yes, there should be an exit. But does that exit require playing it dirty? No. First of all, the legislature also wants that you should get a decent exit. That is why the mutual divorce provisions are there. The personal laws are giving that. Hindu law being a sacrament in the beginning when it was codified, exit clause was given. But it was only on the basis of a fault theory that either you can commit an adultery or maybe a cruelty. But later they realized that why are we making it so dirty? So then section 13B was added. If you go to the Muslim personal law, there is Mubarak. You can take a divorce in the form of Mubarak. If you go for, I would say, a special act, section 28. If you go for Parsi Marriage Act, section 32B. If you go for Christians, section 10A of the Divorce Act. So, if the legislature wants it, the legislature is rather advising you to do it. It is making your life so much easier. Then I would say this is the best way forward to exit a marriage with as much dignity as which you entered. When we enter, we think that we are all praises for each other. Our families are praises for each other. We are always happy. But when we exit, the same families turn into the biggest villains in our lives. When we enter a marriage, everybody says that they are very well off. The husband's salary will be a 6-figure salary. When you exit a marriage, the parties will say that we are paupers and we can't even survive. So what is this? This is just manipulation. And why is it needed? Why are these challenges needed? These are just self-invited challenges, I would say, just that can easily be sorted by a good lawyer giving good advice to the client, not thinking how to make lakhs, but thinking how should my client have the best exit out of this situation, especially if they have children, especially if they are of the marriageable age. If your client is just 30 or 35, think where will the party be after 10 years or after 7 years when finally the divorce proceedings have ended. Secondly, will somebody else marry them after the world knows that if they are a girl, they are of bad character and they have been they are indecent and they had affairs, and if they are a boy, then they have treated their first wife with cruelty and beaten her up. And will it work? Will it be of any help? Will stretching the court proceedings help? Two, after maybe 5 years, even if there is 5 years of, say, a maintenance case going on, the wife will get the maintenance from the date of the application itself. What did, if of course the case is won, what did the husband get in the meanwhile? 5 years of stretching it, paying the lawyer for 5 years, and going to court by leaving their jobs and wasting their time for 5 years. What was the point? So the best way forward is sitting on a table, settling it out, keeping emotions under control, egos in check, and just setting out the settlement terms of agreement, where you can even say that you can decide all these factors. You can decide who gets the children. You can decide who gets how much maintenance. You can decide on every aspect, the divorce. But there are no challenges attached then. First of all, I would say, if possible, if you're not married yet, please do the checks I've told you. But if you have, and there is litigation going on, please cut it short, make it easy, make it simple, make it dignified. Don't play dirty, don't involve families. And if as lawyers you can make sense prevail in your clients, please do. That is, I would say, your prime responsibility as a lawyer. As matrimonial lawyers, court is less of a problem. What happens outside is more. Courts are not that difficult to handle.